warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Ariqah and today I'm going to explain about the late Victorian period. First, I'm going to explain a bit about the characteristic of the era, but before that, I'm going to tell a bit about this era. After Queen Victoria embodied the matronly uprightness that regained until January 1901, and the last years of her reign appeared too patriotic observe to mark the apogee of national and imperial glory. Victorian values, belief, and standard of personal and social behavior were already being challenged, sometimes angrily by a new generation of intellectuals and writers. The literature of the last 20 years of the century engages an extended and various discourse which attempt re-evaluate and the assumption of the 1850s and 1860s and to work out the implication of the new concept of liberation and evolutionary development. If the writers of the first two-thirds of the century can be seen as struggling to come to terms with a multiplicity of impressions, convictions, facts, beliefs, and unbeliefs, their immediate successor reworked ideas and sought parallels, analogues, or images in contemporary scientific thought. They also agonize over disturbing new conclusions. In that more or less, however, lay the real dilemma of the times. It was not simply that certain opinions had gone out of fashion or had been discredited, but at the late Victorian readers tended to condition the idea of human progress with a prominent Darwinian question mark. Society itself was assumed to be developing according to certain laws, but they were laws which threatened old, orderly assumptions by introducing notions of flux, chance, and adaptation. Okay, next we are moving to the characteristic of the works and the famous works in this period. Okay, now we are going to discuss about the agnostic fiction. But before we discuss further about the famous work, here I want to explain a bit about agnostic. Agnostic is the way of how people believe their God by science. They believe the existence of God and they try to approve it through logic. The first author is Mary Augusta Ward. Her work is Robert Elsmere suggests that a chasm has opened up between the Christian earnestness of Dr. Arnold Rugby and those who resolutely search for a religion and a morality beyond the closed world of dogmatic Christianity. Its hero, an angelical priest, become increasingly troubled by doubts occasioned by German higher criticism. Okay, the second author is William Whale. His work is The Revolution in Tennis Lane, moves beyond individual clerical doubt to the border proletarian world of the articulate artisan and the dissenting tradesman. It discusses sometimes powerfully the radical political age of early and middle 19th century nonconformity, or rather the blunting of that age by petty bourgeois aspirations to gentility and respectability. The next characteristic is mystery and history. Its predominant concern were with English society and its ills, with English religion and its development, and with England's position with the United Kingdom, and as the center of a still expanding colonial and commercial empire. There is an obsession with crime, with anarchy, with decadence, reversion, with animals, or simply with the paraphernalia of horror can be seen running through the work of many of key writers of the end of the century. Writers as diverse in their styles and interests as Hardy, Wilde, Yeats, Conrad, Wells, and Stevenson. Okay, the first author is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. His story is A Study in Scarlet introduced Sherlock Holmes to the reading public in 1887, but the fast success of Holmes, um, the super perceptive scientific amateur who runs rings around plodding police detectives, really dates from the series of the short stories published from 1891 in the Strand magazine. The second author is Robert Louis Stevenson. His work is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It stands apart from the rest of his fiction, reaching back through its disparate, disbelieving narrative voice to a variety of English precedent, and yet through its examination of the divine self, nodding to the great Scottish example of what can only be called Calvinist Gothics. The next characteristic of works and the famous work is the colonial expansion. The first author of the colonial expansion is Rudyard Kipling. His work is The White Man's Burden, a poem addressed incidentally to the American imperial mission in the Philippines, has all too often been seen as the noisiest popular apologist for the climatic expansion of the British Empire. The second author is Joseph Conrad. He was a different kind of outsider in search of integrity. Conrad's career as an exile had begun and developed as a merchant seaman, and it was as a writer of sea stories set in East Indies and Pacific that he first attracted public attention. There are some of his works that are The Secret Sharer, Lord Jim, The Secret Agent, and An Outpost of Progress. Okay, here I also add one more work from Oscar Wilde. His work is Dorian Gray. The novel's preface presents a series of attitudinizing aphorisms about art and literature with and with the bold statement, all art is quite useless. I think that's all that I can deliver. But before I close my explanation, here I want to conclude that there are many positive and negative lessons that we can get from this era. The way people start to build their environment with technology and how they become open mind of equality among them. It is also can be said as the negative side of this era about the technology and science that affected almost every aspect in life. Even they have to prove the existence of God by science, and moreover the impact of the technology bring the bad side of for the nature. Most of all people in that era can feel the impact either it's visibly or invisibly, especially for the literary works that also get the impact from this era of occurrences that inspired them to create their works. Okay, I think that's all that I can deliver today. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm so sorry if I have any mistakes from my explanation. For the last I say wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.